This is Taking Care of Business with Marty Pay and Clay Kerner on Kern Radio, News Talk 1180. Taking Care of Business is brought to you by Alliance Brokers and Consultants and Human Resources Outsourcing Incorporated. Now, here are your local business professionals ready to help you take care of business. Marty and Clay.
Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio News Talk 1180. We are live in studio. My name is Marty Pay. And as some of you know, my partner, the $500,000 man, Clay Kerner, had knee replacement surgery about a week and a half ago. But to show you the kind of man that Clay is, as soon as he heard that our in-studio guest was Assemblywoman Jean Fuller, Clay said, no, I'm going to have to be here. So the $6 million man is here. The $500,000 man is here. Clay, how you feeling?
Feeling great, Marty. Thank you very much. And I definitely wanted to be here to meet Jean and see what she had to say about some of the propositions today. Pretty excited about that.
Well, considering what the $6 million man looked like when they were done, are you getting your money's worth with the $500,000 they spent on you so far?
Marty, I'm afraid to say no. I still look the same.
Well, on that note, let's go on to our next subject.
Good idea.
Before we introduce our in-studio guest, a little housekeeping and two items I want to talk a little bit about. Let's see. Our schedule for the next couple of weeks. Brandon Martin is going to be back from the Bakersfield Business Conference, and he's going to be guest hosting with me for a couple of weeks until Clay gets literally back on his feet. Next week, we're going to have Brian Calais from the Claremont Institute, who also works for the Orange County Register. That should be a great interview. Brandon and I have somebody he's working on for the following week, the 11th. That one's going to be taped since Clay won't be 100%, and I'll be out doing a 100-mile bike ride in San Diego County, so you guys can laugh at me on the 11th. The week after, Clay, we're not positive on that guest?
Well, the week after that, we're hoping to have Stan Ellis and Dave come in and talk about the Jam and what they're doing and how they've expanded and grown and their upcoming season, which sounds really exciting.
The week after that, the 25th, we have Keith Woolridge in. And I haven't lined up the date. It'll probably be the week after that. I have an old friend of mine who I did radio with 20 years ago, Jane Chastain, who the name probably rings a bell for some of you. She was the first woman sportscaster in Miami and Atlanta. She's an author, talk show host, used to have a program on KABC and CBS. She's a political commentator, and she actually reminds me a lot of Jean Fuller. There's a lot of similarities between the two. So we're just lining up the date. She's consented to come on, and Jane is really, really sharp. You guys are going to like her a lot. Want to do a little plug here. After the show's over, I'm heading up to Tehachapi. We're having a festival, the West Fire Relief Music Festival in Central Park in Tehachapi. There's going to be 16 bands. It's going to be on all day, 2 stages, all kinds of music from 9 to 9. And all the money raised is going to be given to the Salvation Army and the Red Cross. And I'll be heading up there after the show to make a donation for Farmers Insurance to the cause. And
after the show, Marty, I'm going home and going to bed.
Yeah, for some strange reason. Actually, your leg looks fantastic, all things considered. This is your second knee replacement surgery on the same knee?
You're making me nervous, Marty.
I'm sorry. No, you don't look that kind of good.
Oh.
One thing I wanted to talk about from today's paper that kind of bothered me a little bit. Looking at the article reminded me of a quote from Joseph Goebbels that we're all familiar with. If you tell a big lie long enough and you keep on believing it, or keep on repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. This was from the Nazi propaganda minister. And looking at an article in the paper this morning kind of reminded me of that. Jan Brewer, the governor of Arizona, who I think is a very courageous woman, I mean, my hat's off to her, sent a letter, and we got a copy of the letter. She actually wrote it about 10 o'clock this morning, to Secretary of State Clinton. The U.S. included in its legal challenge to the law, the Arizona law, on a list of ways the federal government has been protecting human rights. So in other words, the Arizona law, as far as the United States is concerned, is a violation of human rights, and she sent a letter into Clinton protesting it vehemently, and I totally agree with her. And I want to read a little quote from that letter, from the letter that she sent to Secretary of State Clinton. Simply put, it's downright offensive that the United States State Department included the state of Arizona and SB 1070 in a report to the United Nations Council on Human Rights, whose members include such renowned human rights champions as Cuba and Libya. Apparently, the federal government is trying to make an international human rights case out of SB 1070 on the heels of already filing a federal court case against the state of Arizona.
Hey, why is it that the federal government, has to sue to get anything done? Every time something's passed, or they try to shove it down our throats and it's turned over, then they have to sue whoever set up the original program.
Well, it's interesting when you look at this. They're not suing on the merits of the bill. What they're suing basically on is jurisdiction. Does Arizona have the jurisdiction, or is this a federal, jurisdiction issue? Because how can they argue with the principle of, you're just checking somebody to see if they're here legitimately after they're stopped for something that they're doing illegally?
You can make it sound any way you want to, Marty. As an example, I was watching the program from Washington this morning that Glenn Beck had, Restoring America. And at the same time, Al Sharpton was having a program talking about how Glenn Beck's trying to steal Martin Luther King's history. And Reverend Sharpton was doing that, as well as Jesse Jackson. So it's interesting to see how you can take something positive and try to make it negative out of it. Sure.
And, speaking of this day, because it is a very positive day, this is the day in 1963. I hate to admit the fact that I remember the speech, but this was the day that in the same location on the mall there, Martin Luther King gave the "I Had a Dream" speech, and it's one of those speeches that's worth revisiting. I read part of it this morning before we came in, and I just hope that here we are 47 years later, we've accomplished some of the things that Martin Luther King has, looked at it in his dream for the future. And I think we're there in some ways, but time will tell ultimately.
Well, Marty, our whole premise is talking about business, and we really haven't been talking as much about business as I'd probably like to talk about. But it's amazing how business and politics come together so much, and that the politicians today are controlling all of our business activities, what we do, how we do it, and what we're going to end up paying in taxes to stay in business.
Well, it's interesting. I had this thought this morning. Actually, I saw somebody put this on Facebook a little bit differently, but it's amazing that we're living in a society where pretty soon you and I are going to have to show proof of insurance, but when we're pulled over, we don't have to show proof of citizenship. Something's wrong with that basic premise there.
Well, I don't even know if we need to show proof of citizenship. How about just proof that you have a driver's license, and maybe that you have some insurance to go along with it if you have an accident?
Well, yeah, you have to show proof of insurance, but wouldn't it be nice to have somebody show proof of citizenship? I mean, I carried a green card for 20 years. I know, there were times I had to show the green card. So, Well, we'll be back in a couple minutes with our guest, Assemblywoman Jean Fuller.
Is she here?
She is here. She's actually a rose sitting between two thorns right now. We'll be back in a minute on Kern Radio, News Talk 1180.